Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of The Long and Winding Railroad. Episode 18, in fact, the December episode of 2021, the last episode of the year. And I was thinking, who can I get to come on this show with me and talk about a match? And I thought, you know what? I need to bring back Dylan Fox, the man who helped me talk about Toshiaki Kawada, Dangerous K himself. And I reached out to him. And I said, Dylan, would you be willing to come back onto the Long and Winding Railroad? He said, WH, I love walking along that road. Of course, I'll come back. Dylan, say hi to everybody here listening to you here on postwrestling.com.
As always, I have mad love for you, WH, and just as much love for Post Wrestling. I always got to shout out Wei, John, everybody involved. What I was doing lately, I've been listening to some of your Marvel podcasts as well that you've been doing. So I've really been a company man, I feel like, lately. I think everybody needs to go to the feed, listen to the show, sign up to the Patreon, do everything you can to support all of you guys' great work. And after our last show that we did, we were talking about it off the air. It's amazing that we're coming up on almost a year since we did that. It really does feel like it's yesterday. It's crazy how time flies sometimes. But that was one of my favorite shows I've ever done. We got a lot of nice comments about it too. I know a lot of people liked it. I'm not just bragging on myself, which I'm not ever against doing. I've never wanted to sell myself short, but I definitely enjoyed that. And I hope everybody enjoys this show just as much, because we were talking off there. Another thing I said was I kind of viewed this show that we're about to do as kind of like a good, like, extra. It's like the bonus edition. If we were to add this show and the other show together, it would be the director's cut. It would be the WH cut of the Kawada series, and I'm very happy for that.
Maybe it's like the disc. If you buy the home release, like the Blu-ray or something like that of like a movie, and then you get like the Kawada, biography would be the main movie, and then this is like the extra stuff, the bonus scenes and all the deleted stuff and like the commentaries and we're going to talk a lot about Kawada again. We're going to get to which match we're going to talk about in a minute, but I want to kind of ask, Dylan, you and your partner Striga over at the Eastern Layered, and the Eastern Layered, by the way, we're going to get the plugs later, but the Eastern Layered has a wonderful Patreon, and Dylan is doing so much audio over there. If you want to know, like pretty much anything and everything there is about Japanese wrestling scene, including like retro stuff too, because Dylan has this project that he does on the Patreon called the 90s Project, which is an amazing look at wrestling from the 90s. Go sign up to their Patreon as well. But like Dylan, this is the last show of the Long and Winding Railroad for 2021, and I just want to get like your quick and general thoughts about what you think of ProRes in the year 2021.
I think it's interesting on a kind of a meta level. I think the fans and kind of observing how the fan base has taken things is more interesting than the in-ring product, because you go back to a lot of the 90s stuff that I watch, and that stuff, it's so good and blows me away constantly when I see all of the 90s projects, especially the top 10 shows. I do that with Fredo Esparza of Lucha World, but he knows everything. He's the only one besides me crazy enough to watch WCW in 2021 and like it. But the fans of what really what is really standing out to me in 2021, because you see how people are so passionate about stuff, whether it's New Japan, yes, but really, I think the fans have really soured on New Japan as a whole, and they've started to really break off and splinter. And you see Noah, even fringe companies like DDT, Stardom has a lot of fans, and Dragon Gate has its own fan base. So we're seeing things splinter, which is in a way a very interesting thing, because for a long time, it really was just New Japan, and then you'd be kind of an outsider if you like some of these other companies. And, even All Japan, you go on Twitter, there's accounts for Dragon Gate, there's an account for All Japan, there's an account for Noah. And I love all of them in different ways. So the fans are what is really interesting to me, more so than the in-ring products of the each company, which it's not like it's super, super terrible, but there's ups and downs, I would say, with pretty much every company. And I would say none of them are really at their peak right now, but there's good things for the future and good things to look forward to coming up. And that makes me happy in and of itself more than anything, is that we have stuff to look forward to, despite whatever issues we may have. And I know me and you probably have a lot of the same issues with some of these companies. So that's what really stands out to me, is the fans and what's coming up in the future.
Yeah, I'm sure you and Strigo will have a pretty like in-depth year-end review show over at the Eastern Layer.
Absolutely. I hope you come on it. You're usually on these award shows that we do.
Well, yeah. I mean, like, I'll eagerly await an invitation. Hopefully, I can make a work within my schedule. But yeah, I've always enjoyed talking with you and Striga about the year end review. I'm sure I'm going to be doing something with John Pollock, before the end of the year for Post Wrestling as well. But let's talk about today's match here on the long and winding railroad. And Dylan, like all other guests, you get to pick the match we're going to talk about today, and let the listeners know what we are going to talk about on this particular episode.
Yes, I am so happy. And I love your format of this one. I've been on pretty much all of your shows you've done on Post Wrestling, and been honored too with the G1 shows, the Liger shows. I love doing those, but this one you get to pick the shows and the matches, and I really enjoy that. So the match I picked, again, as I mentioned at the top, I kind of consider this episode a companion piece to the show we did before, which everyone should listen to. The Kawada special that we did was so much fun and so great to do. This match that we're talking about today was Toshiaki Kawada taking on Mitsuharu Misawa for the Triple Crown, May 1st, 1998. And this was All Japan's first standalone show at the Tokyo Dome. They were at the Dome before, years prior, when they had the big show with WWF and New Japan all at the Dome. But this was their first standalone show. And who better to main event it than the main rivalry?
Main rival did no one on this show lost an eye or had an eye pop out, right?
No. That's happened a couple of times. It's very, very rare in wrestling that has happened, but it has happened a few times.
And of course, I'm referencing the famous match between Stan Hansen and Vader, who, by the way, team on this show. They become a team. All is forgiven about Stan Hansen knocking out Vader's eye from his socket, and they teamed to. We'll talk about the card for this that was on this show, along with the main event of Misawa versus Kawada for the Triple Crown. But why did you pick this match, Dylan?
Yeah, I was thinking about it, and I've loved pretty much the whole series that you've done, and a lot of great matches were picked. That's the part I don't like. Your guests are too smart. They're picking all these great matches. That leaves less for me to pick from. But thankfully, despite all of that, this is a match I probably would have picked anyway, to be honest with you, even if everything was all set. And the reason why I picked it is because after doing that big show with Kawada, it's well known that story-wise, not necessarily the match or the worker or blah, 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 but just for the entirety of the whole, Kawada is kind of my favorite of the four pillars, which is why I was on that show. And at the end of the day, and this match that we're talking about, with the stakes so high, arguably the biggest show in All Japan's history, attendance-wise, but more importantly, this was the most important match for Kawada as a character and on a personal level, and that's what made me pick it, is this was ultimately, not to say that he didn't have many great matches, not to say that he didn't have many great wins and great moments, but this to me is the pinnacle of Kawada's career from pretty much every standpoint.
Right. I mean, I hadn't watched this match in a long time, so when you picked it, I was like, okay, let me watch it. Let me see how good it is, because obviously you say Misawa versus Kawada is going to be good, and I have thoughts about this match. Like I'm not going to say I loved it. I don't hate it, but I enjoyed it. But I'll get more into like how I feel about the match and like its kind of context. And I think that's kind of an important word we're gonna use in today's show, Dylan. I think we're gonna use the word context a lot, because I want to kind of use this match to kind of talk about the rivalry, the history of Mitsuharu Misawa versus Toshiaki Kawada, and like especially in relation to like them fighting over the Triple Crown, which is the top title in All Japan Pro Wrestling at the time. And I would argue probably the top title in Japan, more than the IWGP title, more. And then like from an in-ring standpoint, like the most coveted title in all of wrestling, more than any title in WWE or WCW in the 90s, just because of the sheer quality of matches that they stem from like Triple Crown title matches.
Especially in the 90s, I think that was absolutely true. And listen, the IWGP title is great. It had so much prestige to it, obviously. This was the era of the Three Musketeers. We were kind of getting into that late 90s era at this point. And in a lot of ways, I actually kind of view this as somewhat of the last gasp of the golden era of All Japan in a lot of ways. Not necessarily in match quality, but as the tide was turning, you had stuff like Jumbo died, Baba died. There was turmoil in the company. And by just a year or two from now, we were really entering a totally new era of All Japan, which unfortunately for All Japan ended with the split of the company. But this is, to me, is kind of like the prime age of All Japan. And when you got to 99, 2000, there were great matches, but the luster was really wearing off of all of this. And I have some particular thoughts on Misawa in this match, even though obviously the other show is about Kawada. I think we could grade these two personally as well, in their own separate ways. So I do have some thoughts on that. But this, to me, really felt like the pinnacle of the golden era, not necessarily the peak, but the climax of an entire storyline between these two. So the Triple Crown, I definitely agree with you from the in-ring standpoint and the prestige standpoint. At this point, was definitely the number one title.
So just a little background information. Misawa and Kawada had fought each other 8 times for the Triple Crown. They drew 6 Tokyo Nippon Budokan sellouts. They drew 1 sellout of the Osaka Prefectural Gymnasium. And for this show that we're going to talk about, they drew over 50,000 people to the Tokyo Dome. Though it's been noted that some people got in for free. They gave out like some free tickets, I think, just to, get bring up the number a bit. But hey, that's pro wrestling, right, Dylan?
I completely disagree. All pro wrestling attendances are real, especially in the 90s. I've never heard of anyone to lie, whether it's Inoki, whether it's Baba. I had no idea what you're talking about.
Are you saying that pro wrestling promoters and companies have been dishonest about attendance figures? No, I listen. The only people who've ever been dishonest about that are Vince McMahon and Hulk Hogan. So, but Japanese promoters, completely honest and forthright and forthcoming.
Well, if there's anyone we can trust in life, it's wrestling promoters. Yeah. I think we can all agree with that. But Hogan, he said he drew 200,000 people to a show in Japan. Didn't he say 200,000 in like the Budokan or something? Which is completely impossible.
I think it's well known that he was on drugs. So maybe in his mind, his drug-induced haze at the time, he was thinking about 200,000 people. I don't know. But I in my research, Dylan, someone did some like math here, and they said like with the Budokan sellouts, the Osaka Prefectural Gymnasium sellout, with the Tokyo Dome attendance, that this feud, Misawa versus Kawada, has roughly drew 153,100 people to their matches, paying a total of what could be well over $10 million United States in United States currency. And I'm like, wow, that's pretty impressive. And like, maybe that's not taking into account inflation when this figure was made, when someone like concluded that it was over 10 million US dollars. So maybe with inflation, maybe it's like 20 million now.
That's a good point. I don't have, obviously, I haven't gone through the numbers to that degree. I feel like Meltzer has some kind of list of $1 million gates that he's talked about. But
cumulative over like the period of a feud?
No, I'm just saying for like per show, I'd be interested to know how well this Tokyo Dome show did that we're about to talk about, because when you consider the attendance, whatever it was, whatever the real attendance was, you have to think that they made a ton of money off of this show alone. And you think about all of their matches over the years. I mean, think about if you were to expand that out to all of their 6-mans, all their tag matches, things like that. Then, yeah, I mean, the number feels like it's limitless because of all the great success that All Japan had in the 90s, really based off of the back of these guys. Kobashi and Taue were great wrestlers, love them to death. Greatest of all time and all of that. And Taue definitely needs to be in that Hall of Fame. Speaking of Meltzer, I don't know what some people are talking about out there, but to me, this match, this is another kind of deal. After so much turmoil that we're about to get into with Kawada's last couple of years, this felt like a total vote of confidence that, like, hey, these are the guys in All Japan here, and this is the rivalry that defines this company in this era. So to see them and to hear you bring up those numbers, I would not be surprised at all if that's completely true. And if it's not true, I don't think it's very far off. Just when you combine all of their matches that they had and all the success that they've had together.
Listen, on a side note of what you just said there, Dylan, if Akira Taue goes into the Wrestling Observer Hall of Fame this year, I'm taking all the credit because of the biography episode I did with Dave Musgrave.
That was a great episode.
It was probably the thing that people listen to. Wrestling Observer Hall of Fame. I know several people who vote for that thing. Why I don't have a ballot myself, it's a mystery. It's not so much a mystery. I know why. I'm not going to say why publicly. I'll tell you off the air. But anyways, I'm going to take all the credit. Like Akira Taue goes in, I get the DM from John Pollock. He's like, WH, I got the Observer. Taue's in. I'll be like, it's because of me, obviously, and this particular show, But anyways, let's go back to Misawa versus Kawada. Dylan, as you well know, because you are well learned about the history of both these men. Like their history together isn't just in All Japan. It goes back to their childhood, their high school years, because in the late 70s, both attended the same high school in Ashikaga Kodai. And Misawa was rolled in that high school in 1978. And then Kawada came into that high school 1 year later in 1979. Both were excellent amateur wrestlers as part of the high school wrestling team. Kawada was at the 75 kilogram weight limit, and Misawa was at the 87 kilogram weight limit. And they also both had a passion to become professional wrestlers.
Yeah, we went over that a little bit in the other show, but just to briefly reiterate that, they were really passionate for different reasons. And, Misawa's, that was another great episode you did on Misawa with Hisame. There was a lot of great information about Misawa there, but talking about his dad and the struggles that he had going into wrestling, that was really a great motivation. Whereas Kawada, you look at their history, it's amazing how their storyline that everyone kind of thinks of them just in their roles in All Japan was so similar to real life, where Kawada was always, it felt like he was the unchosen one, is kind of how I would call him, compared to Misawa's golden child, ace type of level. Even back then, it felt that way. But yes, they were both great wrestlers in high school, and they both definitely had a bright future ahead at that point.
And then, when Misawa, graduated high school, he entered All Japan Pro Wrestling. He entered their dojo in March of 1981. And then the following year, at really the kind of urging and behest of Misawa, Kawada, instead of going to the New Japan dojo, because I believe he was accepted there. Is that correct?
Yes.
He instead joined the All Japan dojo because Misawa said, "Hey, come over here. It's awesome. This place is like family, man." So like in March of 1982, Kawada would join All Japan Pro Wrestling, join their dojo system, be seconded to probably Tenryu right away, and like having to wash his body after all the matches, and like take all his clothes to the dry cleaners and do all the young boy shit that they have to do in Japanese wrestling, and I'm sure his life was never the same.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it's a game changer when you're washing people's backs, driving them around, cooking them stuff. I mean, it'll change your life.
I read this tidbit from the Four Pillars. We just to break the fourth wall here. That's Hisami's other account, not just she does the Noah account on Twitter, but she also does the Four Pillars account, which is awesome. I love that account.
Yeah, that's a great account. Everyone
where Tenryu is talking about like he'd run out of money for drinking, and he'd get one of the young boys to go to Giant Papa late at night to go grab more money for him so he could continue drinking. And like it'd usually be like Kobashi or someone. Like it was usually Kobashi. He's like, Kobashi, go to Baba and get some more money for me to continue drinking. He'd be like, when he be asleep? No, he's reading. He's reading. He reads until 2 a.m. in the morning or something. He's still awake. Go there and then come back and bring me some more money to drink. I think that's awesome. Tenryu, what a worker.
Absolutely love Genichiro Tenryu, one of my favorite wrestlers of all time as well. And for all intents and purposes, pretty much everybody who worked with him in War says he was a great boss. So I'm sure he had many, many times ahead, not just with the young boys in the 80s, but even into the 90s. I'm sure he was very popular with many of the wrestlers.
I think it continues to this day. Many people will do Tenryu's like produce shows, and because they all have a love and respect for Genichiro Tenryu. But let's jump ahead into let's jump ahead about 8 years. The date is May 14th, 1990, and this is a very important match for Misawa that Kawada is a part of. And what happens in this match?
Yeah, nothing important. It wasn't that important. No, I'm just kidding. This was the part where Misawa, remember, he was wrestling as Tiger Mask 2 for the last few years of his career in All Japan. He had an excursion in Mexico. Definitely recommend going back and listening to our other show for this part too, because there was a lot of good info on Kawada's excursion and the differences between Misawa and Kawada specifically. But finally, after Tenryu left, the man who we just talked about how everybody loved, the one man who didn't love him was Giant Baba, who publicly swore that he would never wrestle in All Japan again because he left to go upon this, take advantage of this money mark who ran this glasses company and started SWS. And Baba was super pissed about it. And he realized, hey, I need new main eventers. So he started this storyline with Misawa ripping off the mask. Kawada actually took the mask off for him. Misawa throws the Tiger Mask into the crowd. I am not Tiger Mask. I am Misawa. And that is what started pretty much the hottest storyline in All Japan history.
That's right. But like it just goes to show you like how Kawada is so pivotal to some of the biggest moments in Misawa's career. And then let's jump another year ahead into the future. And then on July 24th, 1991, the team of Mitsuharu Misawa and Toshiaki Kawada, the Super Generation Army, they win their first of a couple of All Japan World Tag Team titles. This beating the Miracle Violence Connection of Terry Gordy and Dr. Death Steve Williams. And then August 22nd, 1992, Misawa wins the Triple Crown for the first time, defeating Standalary Hansen. And then as well, on September 9th of that year, to determine Misawa's first challenger for the Triple Crown, Dylan, it was Akira Taue, Kenta Kobashi. It was
Kawada.
Kawada and Taue. I thought not a three-way. Kawada and Taue. We're going to get to three-ways later. Kawada and Taue have a match and determine the first challenger of Misawa, and it is Kawada who wins. He submits Taue, and then and they're still tag team partners at this time, right, Dylan?
Yes. This is something very interesting because I don't think we actually got into this that much. So I'm going to kind of raise this question to you now, because if there are any listeners to our Patreon on there, me and Fredo always kind of come back to this point, especially in the early 90s. Is Kawada and Misawa as great or better than Kawada and Taue as a tag team? Because the only thing I feel like they miss is the longevity that Kawada and Taue had. But Kawada as a babyface is way underrated, like compared to his, once he turned on the Super Generation Army. Once when he was teaming with Kawada, he really did a lot for that team. If you look at their tag matches, many of them would follow a distinct format of, let's say Misawa had a big injury, like a nose injury or something like that, and he would sell it and he would get knocked out of the ring, and then Kawada would spend the entire match selling, and he would just do some great work. And they were a truly tremendous and underrated team because obviously Kawada had more success with Taue, and Misawa obviously had more success with everything he did, pretty much. But they are a truly underrated and amazing tag team. I really recommend them. Recommend everybody listening go back and watch some of their work, because I think you'll be very surprised at just how good they are, and they continued up to this point. Well,
I to answer your question, I think that I think you have made a good point. they don't have the longevity of the Holy Demon Army. But I will say this: I think Kawada and Misawa is a better tag team than Misawa and Kobashi.
Yeah, I agree with that. And, maybe the personal history of the two really lends into that because I thought they were really kind of underrated because they never really get brought up as one of the greatest tag teams. But if you look at their run, it's like it was all hits, man, and like all bangers for them.
And they're like fighting, MVC. They're fighting, Jumbo and Taue multiple times, and those are all bangers, So they have in the short time that they're a tag team, they have like a pretty amazing selection of matches that you could go and watch and just like amazed at. Like, no, they were a great tag team. I just think for me personally, like, where Taue and Kawada are kind of like a team of equals. Like, it's clearly Misawa is, the boss, the captain of the team, know, and Kawada is his sidekick kind of more than than his partner per se, because this is an element that comes up so much in their history together, both on screen in the ring and then behind the scenes in real life, is that Kawada is Misawa's kohai, he's his junior. Misawa is the senpai, he's the senior, he's the guy who has seniority even by a year over Kawada. And so I think that plays out in a lot of their dynamics in their matches as a tag team. And whereas I think when you see Kawada and Taue, it's very much these guys are equals. Kawada's not necessarily the captain, he's the bigger star of the team in the Holy Demon Army, but he's not like Taue's not his sidekick. Taue's his partner.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. And that's, I think, why they lasted much longer. Their legacy is much bigger than Misawa and Kawada. As it turned out, just Misawa and Kawada, I think pretty much everyone agrees are better as enemies anyway than friends. Like, even them together are more known for their matches against each other than as tag team partners. So, what you said is true.
It's a classic formula in Japanese wrestling, especially if the promoter, like in this case, John Baba, was like, okay, these two are going to be rivals, but first I'm going to make them a tag team. He did that with Jumbo and Tenryu, earlier, in the history of All Japan. And then you see the same thing happen. Like, a kind of more recent example would be like, New Japan knew they wanted Nakamura, Shinsuke Nakamura and Hiroshi Tanahashi to be rivals in the future. So they made them tag team partners and tag team champions first. And then they'd be like, okay, now you're going to be eternal rivals with one another. And, so like, this is a very similar, formula that Giant Baba employs, like in terms of creating this dynamic with Misawa and Kawada that he's going to play off of like for years to come, for pretty much an entire decade almost. Like, we're going to see this dynamic play out.
I will say one thing that makes those circumstances a little bit different in this case is the unique circumstances of All Japan at this time, because as I just mentioned when we were talking about the Tiger Mask thing, that really got pushed forward because Tenryu left at the end of the day. And Kawada turning on, and not to say that they wouldn't have ended up together eventually anyway, but remember, this is right around when Jumbo got taken out of the picture and Taue needed a tag partner. So Kawada was the natural choice. It would have been very interesting to see if Kobashi had been the one to turn and join Taue. But obviously, considering how things played out so well, you can't doubt it. But I think I think things would have happened a little bit differently if Jumbo had been fully healthy at that time. Kawada would have stayed along with Misawa for a bit longer.
Definitely. But they are going to collide on All Japan's 20th anniversary show on October 21st, 1992. And, this date, 10/21/92, would, a lot of people, experts of All Japan Pro Wrestling of the 90s period would say like 10/21/92 would set the standard and of like what would become the classic, 90s All Japan main event style. Lots of high spots, stiff strikes, big bombs and head dropping suplexes and just, but along with that, Dylan, just like this amazing storytelling and psychology throughout all these matches. But like Kawada and Misawa set the standard basically with their 10/21/92 match.
Yeah, I love that match a lot. Really, all of their matches are varying degrees of awesome, I would say. Maybe you like one better than the other, or, five better than the other. But to me, that match was so great. I loved that uh, this was really the spot where, I think it's worth mentioning too, where this was really when Kawada was showing that he can be on Misawa's level, which is interesting. We're about to talk about a match from 6 years later, which he still hadn't quite reached that level up to this point. But that was really the first time that it felt like, hey, he's catching up to Misawa. He is on the same level. He might not be completely as good, but they are on the same level now, and I think that's the match that really set for their personal story that really played into it. And also, if you go back and watch that match, the crowd was completely behind Kawada in that match and not Misawa, which is another telltale sign of where they were going.
A year later, on July 29th, 1993, they are again facing off against each other for the Triple Crown. But this time, they're now enemies because Kawada has left the Super Generation Army. He's now teaming with Akira Taue in the Holy Demon Army, and Kobashi has become Misawa's main tag partner. What do you, just quickly, your thoughts on 7/29/93?
Oh, another big match, I would say. You think about their series. I think it was good to see this, but this was around the point too. I thought their tag work was so strong at this point that it kind of even overshadowed like this singles match. This was a great match, don't get me wrong, but I loved their tag match from the month prior as well. But there's so many great matches, it's hard to even pick one over the other. But this was a really strong match, and another very interesting one to pick on your part, because it really is another kind of the start of a new chapter for them, with Kawada now as a true enemy of Misawa rather than a partner.
And then another year later, on June 3rd, 1994, at the Nippon Budokan, Kawada versus Misawa again. And for me, like, I don't know what you think about this match, Dylan, but for me, I think this is the match that I think Kawada should have won and beat Misawa for the first time for the Triple Crown.
Yeah, that to me is one of the greatest matches of all time, legitimately. And kind of the one, I think, if you were a fan of Japanese wrestling, maybe not even there, but just if you were a tape trader, started watching later on, whenever you started watching, if you just say that when a match is really good, when you can just mention the date and everyone thinks of it, when you say June 3rd, 94, everybody thinks of Misawa versus Kawada. In terms of who should have won, again, I think we really briefly touched on this, not too much on the other show, but I will say this. I thought that you are totally right. Like, when you look at the story, and this is kind of going to play into my overall point on Misawa at the end of all of this, for the story of not just Kawada, but for the overall good of all Japan, I think it would have been so much better to have to elevate Kawada to that level of finally getting that win over Misawa much sooner than it actually happened. Regardless of whatever we think about this match and the moment and all of that, if he had won in 94, I think it would have been better for everybody involved, perhaps even Misawa at the end of it, if you look at the end of the decade, how things were trending. But I definitely agree with you. If it were up to me, and Baba, amazing booker, I would never, disparage him or make any negative comments on Baba. But this is one of his bigger mistakes, and I mean, it was, it still wasn't that much of a mistake considering things still played out pretty well, all things considered. But this is definitely one that I always look at and say, I really think Kawada should have won. So I do agree with you, WH.
I mean, we have the benefit of hindsight. I mean, we're looking at this from a lens of like decades have passed, since like the last match these guys had, in Pro Wrestling Noah. And we're going to talk about that briefly as well near the end. But I do think, like, in hindsight, looking back, like with kind of more like kind of a critical eye with kind of more of an academic lens, so to speak, like you can argue, and I think successfully, like that this is where Kawada should have ascended to be his equal and his true rival in every aspect of the word, instead of being kind of like that guy that was underneath. But to I think for Baba, one of his big philosophies as a booker and a promoter was the chase is everything, right? So here it's playing out with Kawada and Misawa. But it's not all bad news for Kawada in 1994, because October 22nd he would win the Triple Crown for the first time from Dr. Dave Steve Williams, from someone who Steve Williams like has said like, hey, we hated each other, legit.
Yes, we went into that as well. But yes, it's amazing how that happens sometimes where, sometimes if you're outside of the ring chemistry isn't that great, it can also lead to great matches in the ring somehow. Just a little bit more intensity, a little bit more fire. And I thought, in general, 94 was Dr. Death's best year as a wrestler. So he was firing on all cylinders. And Kawada getting that win was really good. And that's another thing. To see him win it later on, I think is a little bit of a disappointment. And it kind of plays into Kawada's overall story. And I think to not defend Baba, but just to kind of state the lineage of All Japan in general at this time. You always think about the wrestlers being color-coded, right? Taue with the red, Kobashi with the orange, Misawa with the green, Kawada with the black and yellow. And I think that in a lot of ways, their roles are very similar to that way. Misawa's role was of the ace of the company. And to see him lose to a native like that and to show any kind of signs of slowing down, I don't think Baba really wanted. And Kawada's story was as the guy who was below Misawa, and he wanted to continue those stories. Kobashi was the fiery guy, so emotional and everything he did. The fans loved him. Taue, the big guy, kind of like Baba's spiritual successor in a lot of ways. So they each had their individual roles, and I don't think Baba was really ready to change that or divert from that path at this point.
No, I think that's a really excellent point there. But Kawada's first Triple Crown reign would end on March 4th, 1995. He would lose the title to Stan Hansen. But this kind of like Hansen reign was kind of more like Hansen was the transitional champ, as he would go on to lose the Triple Crown on May 26th to Mitsuharu Misawa. It's really interesting. Like, Misawa wouldn't win the Triple Crown from Kawada, at this time, but like Kawada can't win the title from Misawa, and Misawa, for whatever reason, Baba didn't want him to lose the title to Misawa, like Kawada to lose the title to Misawa, so he had Stan Hansen beat him, and this is really kind of like the tail end of like Hansen's peak, because he's pretty much all that style wrestling the way he did for like the last 20 years has pretty much caught up to him by 1995.
Yeah, I totally agree. Stan Hansen, love him. I think, is there anyone who thinks Stan Hansen sucks? Like, literally. What are you doing?
Just people who are dumb.
We know that there are some dumb people out there when it comes to wrestling, but that's the one thing that I don't think I've ever seen. Like, who seriously says, Stan Hansen's overrated? I've never seen that. Not from one person who said, Hansen, he sucks. Why does everybody like him? All four of the pillars have detractors in some way or fashion. And I think pretty much everyone agrees they're great on some level. But you see Misawa, people can bring up criticisms. Kawada, criticisms. Kobashi was, Chop Bashi became kind of a thing with him. Taue, man, gets ripped all the time, super unfairly. But Hansen, I don't think I've ever really seen anybody say, Hansen, he's no good.
I mean, I gotta say, I can't recall ever seeing that kind of criticism about Stan Hansen online. And why would you? Because he is, as you say, he is great. I love Stan Hansen as a wrestler as well. But
I wouldn't associate with someone like that anyway. So that is one thing.
No, me neither. But this brings us to like another famous date in wrestling history, Dylan. You talk about, you say the date, or you even just say the numbers, and people know exactly what you're talking about if they're wrestling fans. And this brings us to 6/9/95. Many people call this the greatest tag team match of all time. One of the greatest matches in general of all time. Maybe some people even say this is the greatest match of all time. I don't know if I would go that far myself, but it is, I think, the greatest tag team match of all time. Not some cosplaying bullshit that we see in wrestling in the last couple of years. This is actually a true greatest tag team match of all time. And it's notable for our purposes, for our context, Dylan, because this is where Kawada pins Misawa for the first time.
Yes, and yet again, the match of the year to 90s Project listeners. This was number one for 95. 6/3/94 was number one for 94, and they followed it up again. with the match of the year. And as you said, one of the greatest matches of all times for sure. And too many people, like you said, they would put it up there number one. I think the same is true for 94 as well, but this match was so important for Kawada. And I think, again, I don't want to speak for Baba, obviously, or anything like that, but I think the way he's mapped this out, and you mentioned him not dropping the title to Misawa, instead kind of having these transitional flip-floppy title reigns with, because Misawa had that long title reign and really established him as the ace. And then you had short-term reigns for, Kawada, Doc Death, Hansen, and now we're getting back to Misawa, and this win was meant to be Kawada's moment. Obviously, we wanted it to be the year prior. I think he wanted this to be a total triumph of finally beating Misawa. Although I think that for a couple of reasons, I don't think it it didn't quite reach that peak. A good comparison, I guess, in an interesting way, not exactly the same, but I think a fair one, is when Naito beat Okada at the Dome in the second time, and that it was very good, but it felt like a consolation prize, considering where all the pieces felt like they were in place the first time, and the second time was still great, and this win was great and an all-time great tag match, but it didn't quite have the oomph that it would have a year prior in a singles match.
No, and like that would lead that victory over Misawa in the tag match would lead to July 25th, 1995 at the Budokan Hall, Kawada versus Misawa, and you would think like the momentum of beating him in that classic tag team match would propel him to win the Triple Crown from Misawa at this match, but no, that didn't happen. Misawa defeated Kawada, and again, if it's not going to be the 94 match, then it should have been this match that Kawada beat Misawa for all the reasons that you just laid out a couple of minutes ago.
This was a big fumble, in my opinion. To immediately go back on it, I definitely was not a huge fan of at all looking back. And as you said, at the end of the day, even when I first watched these matches 10 years ago or whatever, that's still 15, 20 years beyond where this actually happened at. So we are looking back in hindsight. But to me, even at the time, I'm pretty sure I'd have thought like, what? When this happened, so I really totally agree with you. I think this was actually kind of even worse than the 94 one, because it halted the momentum that he could have had. And I get it about the roles and all of that, as I mentioned, the point I made before. But after you have him win, I think it's time to shift gears a little bit. Again, not just for Kawada, but for the entire company. I think it would have benefited from a little bit more. But, Baba, one thing about him, too, is he is a notoriously conservative booker. And he valued Misawa at that level. And it's hard to blame him, considering Misawa is also one of the greatest wrestlers of all time. And many people would say he is the greatest wrestler of all time. So it's not like I'm saying, oh, what a crazy decision this was to favor Misawa so much. And, on a positive side as well, again, it played into their character so much. As I said, Kawada, the unchosen one. It's like, even when it all makes sense for him to be the guy, for whatever reason, he still can't quite get that love and can't quite get over the hump.
Well, I mean, you talking about he can't get the love from Giant Baba. I think that's really epitomized 2 years later on April 19th, 1997. Where we get the finals of the champion Carnival for that year. And it's not a singles match, Dylan, to determine the winner. It's 3 singles matches because we have a 3-way tie for the top spot. Mitsuharu Misawa, Toshiaki Kawada, and Kenta Kobashi. And the way this is booked, so the way this is booked is that Misawa and Kobashi, they lost the draw. They have to face each other, and they go to a 30-minute time limit draw. They're exhausted. They gave it all in this match against each other. And then, right after that match, who comes in? A fresh Toshiaki Kawada, and he destroys Misawa in just over 6 minutes. But who cares? Because, Misawa just wrestled Kobashi for 30 minutes. So, who cares? Of course Kawada's going to beat him. And then Kobashi comes back to the ring, and Kobashi takes about 21 minutes to destroy him as well. Not destroy him, but he beats him and to win his second champion Carnival. And to me, this is what the fuck is this? This is bullshit. Kawada's first singles win, over Misawa was after Misawa was like totally destroyed. This is like a total Triple H move. You know what I mean? I look at this. I still think about this match, these circumstances, and I think, what a horrible way to book Kawada.
Oh, yeah. Again, I feel like I definitely mentioned this. I can't say for sure, but this always stands out to me as just, this was a huge screw up by Baba. And I'm sorry, I don't want to besmirch your name, Baba, but you definitely made a mistake with this whole deal. I thought it was so insane to blow his singles victory in this way. I thought this was like, we're going to get into this match, in a little bit, but this triple threat bullcrap deal, gauntlet or whatever they did, was such a huge letdown, and I think really followed Kawada all the way up to where we're going to, because it was such an insane way to go about it, to have him win in this fashion, this completely dumb and meaningless fashion, and you blow a storyline you've been working on for literally 7 years at this point. This is all built up to, and you just wasted on this. Can you imagine if Okada had never beaten Tanahashi, and then just this year he finally beats him in like a 5-minute match in a triple threat bullcrap Gato, type of deal. Okada's career path would have been so much different and so much worse than how they did it. I was truly mind boggled, but it is worth mentioning again. We go more in depth on this for sure. Kawada had some political issues at the time, through 96 and through 97. So he had a little bit of heat on him backstage, which if this was supposed to be punishment, then great job.
It's like what's the phrase I'm looking for? Like, it's cutting off your nose to spite your own face, right? That's what Bob was doing. Yeah, I know. It was Kawada like complaining, like, why aren't we doing interpromotional? Why are we just keeping our isolationist policy? And it's like,
which he was right, and Bob agreed
he's totally
with him
right.
when Bob brought in the F&W guys, not like later this year.
Oh yeah, I mean, like, he was right, but like that's where the theoretical like heat was from, where how dare you speak against Baba, and I'm not trying to besmirch Giant Baba. I love Giant Baba, but
we all love Baba.
Hey, he's not. He's human too. He was not perfect as a booker or as a person either. But but that of course leads us to, of course, Kawada being the triple, the champion Carnival winner. He gets the title shot against Misawa again for the Triple Crown, like on June 6th, 1997 at Budokan Hall again. And hey, again, why doesn't he win the title here? He should have won the title here.
After that, I think that Champion Carnival win was such a like a dud moment. It would have been kind of hard. Like all the other ones I agree with. I think the Champion Carnival win was so lackluster, it really hurt him and hurt his momentum. So I think if he had won the title here, and ultimately I think what we're about to talk about is much better than if he had won it there, because we have this huge venue and this huge stage set up for it. If it was just a Budokan show after what had happened, if it was just random Budokan on its own, yes, I love it, and that would have been great. But I think after the Champion Carnival debacle that was, which All Japan would later continue their debacle in 2021 with another triple threat bullcrap scenario, which has also hurt one of their champions to this day, in Jake Lee. But after that, I would have not put the title on him after that, to be honest.
Well, fair enough. I just think at some point it should have happened before the match we're going to talk about, and that's of course.
I think it was already too late.
It's already too late. Sure.
It was already too late a year prior to when they did it, which is a kind of a damning point in and of itself.
And that brings us to the next Triple Crown Challenge, May 1st, 1998. Kawada versus Misawa, the main event of the All Japan 25th anniversary show. And this show emanates from the Tokyo Dome. It's their first standalone show, as you were saying, Dylan. The attendance is listed at being 58,300 people. Well, legit, I don't know. Gate around $4 million.
They were hanging from the rafters.
United States dollars. Legit, I don't know. Maybe. Who knows? By the way, I'm getting all this information from the wonderful site known as Cage Match. And so, if Cage Match says it's these figures, then it must be true, right, Dylan?
Uh, no, not thinking it's cage match just because of Japanese wrestling in the 90s. I think no source can be considered completely reliable at this point. But I would love to know the legit dollar amount of this show in particular. I mean, it felt like it was about as hot of a dome, just in terms of the show itself. I mean, if you look at this card, we're probably going to run down this card right in a second. And if you look at this card, it wasn't that great of a show, to be honest with you. Outside of the main event, they really banked everything on Kawada and Misawa. And it's very interesting that they would do it this way, considering where they were just a year prior, as we mentioned, with the craziness of the Champion Carnival. And now we're all the way here. And it was such a trying time. It felt like, they were starting to do something a little bit different. This is kind of the point I was making when we were talking about Kawada's heat, is he did get heat for that, but Baba himself was smart enough to know that maybe there was a wisdom in what Kawada was saying, because he was starting to bring in the outsiders, whether it was the FMW. He accepted Hase into All Japan, who was now on this show. He was bringing in like UWF guys to be on the roster as well, like Takayama and so to speak. So like he was bringing in a lot of different guys and not just being this isolationist company as he was in the past. And I think it was necessary because, as I said, this show just wasn't that hot outside of the main event.
Well, let's take a look at this card. So let's start at the beginning of this show. Singles match. Satoru Asako defeats Yoshinobu Kanemaru in 6 minutes, 26 seconds. Manuaki Mossman defeats Daisuke Ikeda from Battle Arts in 10 minutes and 50 seconds. 6-man tag team match. Excuse me. Jumbo Tsuruta, Mitsuo Momota, and Rusher Kimura defeat Haruka Aigen, Masanobu Fuchi, and Tsuyoshi Kikuchi. Wow.
Hey, not to cut you off a little bit, but I this match totally stuck out to me because I had no idea Jumbo was on this show all the way in 98. I was so surprised by that, considering where his health was at the time. And it makes me really happy to know that he did get to he was in the Dome on the other show that they did, obviously. But to see him be on this show for an All Japan, that did make me really happy to see.
Yeah, it's really cool. And like the fact that he's on opposite sides of Fuchi is pretty interesting as well. A tag team match, the Headhunters, like these one of the FMW teams or FMW towns that you're talking about. Headhunter A and Headhunter B, very creative names, defeat Shigeo Okamura and Taman Honda in 9 minutes and 24 seconds. Johnny Smith and Wolf Hawkfield defeat Geto and Jado. Whatever happened to those two? Anything? Did they succeed in this business?
If they did, I try not to pay attention to them, so I'm not the right person to
So yes, they lose in 12 minutes and 31 seconds. 6-man tag team match. Akira Taue, your favorite wrestler, Masao Inoue and Takao Omori
what
defeat Hideki Hosaka, Tetsuhiro Kuroda, and Mike Awesome, aka the Gladiator, in 17 minutes and 43 seconds. Yeah, aren't you? You're the biggest Masao Inoue fan in the world, right?
You say this as I'm wearing my Takao Omori shirt right now. In a way, he's probably one of the worst wrestlers to ever come out of All Japan. I would say, although he did have one great match versus Akiyama in Noah, so I will say that. But no, I definitely do not consider him one of my personal favorites. I'm sure someone out there is, though. We need to figure out who loves Masao Inoue.
No, we don't. I want to meet these people who are big Inoue fans.
I support you. No matter who your favorites are, I support you.
I don't. If you support Masao Inoue, I don't want to know who you are, and I do not support you. Dylan's a far more generous person than I am, but no. Anyways, the Triangle of Power. Gary Albright and Steve Williams. What a great tag team name. Just amazing. I think Steve Williams was part of some really interesting tag teams that had great tag team names. Miracle Violence Connection, the Varsity Club, the Triangle of Power, I
mean, and even Dr. Death is such a great name when you think about it. So clearly his name game was on point, and his tag team game was also on point there. Even in 98, I wonder how he was doing. When was this? When did he go to WWF? Anyway, because I feel like this was around the time he was either going there or.
I think he was, yeah, him and Albright did have a run as a tag team, right? And I think this is like soon after that. Like him going to WWF is like pretty much soon after this, disastrously. So,
yes, a very, very bad.
We will not talk about Steve Williams. I don't even want to think about like some of the stuff he was doing on Raw with Jim Ross at the time. Oh, terrible. But
heel JR, which would a gimmick that would go over much better in 2021. I feel like because he has way more heat with the fans than he did in 1998.
This is true. Yes. But the Triangle Power defeat Masahiro Kakihara and Yoshihiro Takayama in 15 minutes and 8 seconds. A 6-man tag team match. I love this team. Giant Baba, Hayabusa, and Kentaro Shiga taking on the team of Giant Kimala, Jinsei Shinzaki, and Jun Izumida, who is the Japanese version of Giant Kimala. In 20 minutes and 19 seconds. What an odd combination of Giant Baba and Hayabusa together.
Everything about this match is just nuts. It feels like all 6 of these people have no reason to be together at all, outside of maybe Hayabusa and Shinzaki, obviously, but even then they're in such a wacky teams on each side, it really doesn't make any sense. But I do love that Shiga got to have a little bit of a standout moment teaming with Hayabusa and Baba.
Jun Akiyama defeats Hiroshi Hase in 26 minutes and 35 seconds. And our semi-main event was the team of global, energetic, and tough. That's right. Johnny Ace and Ken Kobashi, and they took on the dream team of Stan Hansen and Vader, and they defeated them in 22 minutes and 12 seconds. And I cannot remember if I've ever seen this match, but I'm sure at some point I'm going to review it.
Yes, and I hope you do. I have seen it before. I've seen both of these matches. When we were talking about it, we actually pushed our recording schedule back a week. And during that time, I made sure to watch these extra matches that I could see. And the 2 I watched were the top 3 matches. I don't even know if you could find that crazy match with Baba online, although I would love to see it. If the Jumbo match or the Baba match is out there somewhere, I would love to see it. That was actually Vader's debut in All Japan as well, was in that tag team match. And what a great way to do it. You have to love – Vader's another guy with WWF run. This is when you remember Bradshaw was in like the tag league this year in All Japan
with Barry Windham, right?
Yeah. The
new Blackjacks.
The new Blackjacks. Yes. So yes, WWF and All Japan were closely aligned somehow in 1998. Just completely different world, but everything you could say is first of all, on that singles match with Akiyama and Hase, I really like the idea of that. Hase was like my favorite worker at the time of all the New Japan guys, or at least especially the New Japan heavyweights. And the fact that they wrestled that match, Akiyama was the perfect person to wrestle him. But to do such a different style, because that match was much more in line with the New Japan style of wrestling than the King's Road style. So I really appreciated that, getting some spotlight. And as far as the semi-main event, if you ever have this trivia question, you can say it here. In All Japan's Tokyo Dome show, their biggest show in the history of their company, Johnny Ace was in the semi-main event.
Hey, he is Mrs. Baba's favorite wrestler, dude. That counts
clearly.
That counts for something. So there you go. So yes, and this brings us to our main event for the Triple Crown. Toshiaki Kawada challenges Mitsuharu Misawa. And since Kawada and Misawa had a 30-minute draw in the Champion Carnival a month before, it was stipulated that this match would not have a time limit, assuring fans they would see a winner and a clear-cut loser in this match. So let's get into this match, Kawada versus Misawa from May 1st, 1998 from the Tokyo Dome. So we start off the match. Misawa comes into the match having defended the Triple Crown in this current reign 8 times. This is more than any previous champion, Dylan, even more than his epic 2-year reign from 92 to 94, where he defended that title 7 times. He also came into the match with like a slew of injuries, it seems. And this would explain his injuries were so bad that after this match, he would go on to miss the next two tours for All Japan.
Yeah, and that was a big part of the match and how it was worked. It was clearly no secret going into it that Misawa was very hurt here, and that was a big part of the story. After the prior month going to the draw, it gave this match that we're about to talk about a little bit of a different feel compared to the other ones. And the other ones are probably more legendary, again, in terms of like star ratings and things like that and match quality. But the injury to Misawa opened the door for this match to be what it was. For Kawada's end, I will say that I thought that, first of all, his theme music, this version of his theme was his best remix. And he had like 3 different versions of Holy War 21. This was my favorite one, the 98 version. He just comes out very basic. He's in, his robe. He really seems like a legit badass fighter when he's walking out. There definitely was a buzz that this match was going to be something different, not just in terms of how they worked the match on a critical eye level, but obviously how this match would play out in terms of the result of it.
Well, as you say, Kawada does look badass. He is the challenger, so he comes out first. And holding the ropes for him is a very young Naomichi Marufuji. I love watching these old matches to see who the young boys are. And I spotted, Takeshi Morishima, tons of people. We're going to talk about them. Misawa is a Triple Crown champion, comes out next. And as both are in the ring, we have the title proclamation done by the legendary Lord James Blears, who is like a dear friend of Giant Baba's, who had this role as the person who read the title proclamation for many years.
Yes, and I love that. I absolutely love that it made the matches all feel super important. Lord James Blears is totally awesome, in my opinion, and that's something I wish they would bring back, even if it wasn't him, if it was just some legendary figure of some sort that could do these proclamations. It really made the Triple Crown feel like that main title. This is something I always bring up. We kind of mentioned modern wrestling earlier. Never mind the wrestling, which I think in general, the in-ring work is at a very high level, across the board, even though we have some differences of, quality sometimes. I think one thing that has really gone down recently is the aesthetic quality. I always mention that when you won the Champion Carnival before, you get the big check. You get a ton of trophies. Same with the G1. Nowadays, it's like you get a like this dinky little trophy that doesn't seem prestigious at all. And it's like, what happened? This stuff is so cool. It makes the match feel important. And James Blears, he comes out with this Dumb and Dumber suit that he has on, all with the blue. I loved everything about this whole intro.
That's great. Stan Hansen used to do these title proclamations, before he, just didn't want to come to Japan anymore, like that often to do these. He just come to Japan just to do these Triple Crown title proclamations for the Muto period of All Japan, with Kojima on top and Kawada in there still. But I do agree. I think like having someone do the title proclamation is a very important thing, and it should be like an ex wrestler, I feel, as well. But I want to talk very quickly about the cornermen in each guy's respective sides of the ring. So Kawada's corner, we have Makoto Hashi, Takao Mori, and again, your favorite wrestler, Masao Inoue.
Where did this rumor start?
In Masao's corner, Manokea Mossman, aka Taiyokea, Satoru Asako, and Kentaro Shiga, which is interesting because Shiga is basically going to jump over and become a member of Burning in a couple of months, I think, and be Kobashi's guy in the corner.
And he was a great one all the way into Noah as a great partner, along with Hashi, who would eventually become Akiyama's right-hand man, so to speak. So lots of great talent here. Kind of forgotten in the modern age. They don't really get talked about as much. But I thought Shiga was a really good I'm not going to say like a main event level talent or anything, but good mid card guy. Kind of like how Yoshihashi is in New Japan now. I kind of see him in a similar way, and even more so with Hashi, who I thought was a fantastic wrestler. He would grow into. So lots of great talent, as well as Misawa in a way, who was also at ringside.
Of course, our referee is, of course, the legendary Kyo Iwata. This is like when Kyo Iwata is the best referee in all of wrestling across the world.
Yes, much different than he is now.
Yes.
But yes, huge fan of Wada at this time. Even though am not always kind to him in the modern era, great, tremendous performer at the time. I thought he added so much. That's another thing. Again, I think more than anything else, the aesthetics of wrestling was so good in the 90s and set things at such a high bar. And to that point, I'm going to ask your opinion on something, WH. What did you think of the setup for this Tokyo Dome for All Japan? Because it was basically, you look at the New Japan version nowadays for the January 4th shows, and it's this big dramatic stage. Sometimes you get pyro. Even in the Noah show they had in 2005, it was like this big dramatic thing. Here, it was like literally they just kept the baseball field aesthetic. There was no big screen, no nothing. They just walked out of wherever they walked out of behind at the outfield wall, it felt like, and just walked to the arena. What did you think of this look?
I didn't really like it. I mean, it looks terrible compared to Budokan. Like, and like I can say as someone who's been to both to see big shows, like I've been to Budokan and I've been to Tokyo Dome. I will take a show at Budokan 9.5 times out of 10 over going to see a show at the Tokyo Dome. If you said to me, WH, you have a choice, you can either watch, this Wrestle Kingdom match or show at the Tokyo Dome with like however many people, like 38,000, 45,000 people, or you can go see a show at the Budokan for another promotion that's not, doesn't have the brand of Wrestle Kingdom. I'll take that Budokan show any day because it looks better. It feels more intimate, and it feels like, I think this 25th anniversary show, I know why they did it in the Tokyo Dome. I understand the money, the money reasons and everything else, and the prestige that, that the Tokyo Dome carries. I just think this would have been better in Budokan. I think it would have made the atmosphere a bit better as well.
I just wonder, because you compare it to the New Japan setup, and it's so much more dramatic when you look at the New Japan stuff. Even around this era, they had so much more to the entrance. It was a special setup. Here, it was like literally bare bones. Like,
well, I mean, they had no experience setting up the Tokyo Dome. Like New Japan had the benefit of like just running that every year, and at that time just running it multiple times in a single year. So they knew, like, from trial and error, like, oh, this is what works, this is what looks good on TV, this is what's good for the fans, and to get great acoustics, blah blah blah, all these things, they just are working from experience. Like, New Japan in 2021 has like 20 plus years of running the Tokyo Dome. So they know like how to set it up. They know what's going to look good. And they have the benefit of having a lot of money to make it look amazing. Like, whereas like, Giant Baba was always very much a bare bones, wrestling promoter. He didn't go for the flash or like all the, technology. Hey, I just need a spotlight to show the wrestlers coming from the dressing room into the ring, and some music to play their theme songs, and like a speaker and a CD player. That's all I need. And, that's kind of like, it works for All Japan at the time. Like, they're never going to, even at that point, they were never going to reach New Japan production levels. And I don't think Baba was very concerned about those kinds of things either, good or bad, but it is what it is. I don't know. Like, I'm not a huge fan of shows at the Tokyo Dome in general. So there you go.
Yeah. I just think, whatever you feel about the Dome, I just think comparing it to New Japan is interesting, and kind of what you said about Baba as a promoter, but also I think it kind of fit the vibe of All Japan, just in general. And it exemplified the differences between the two companies at the time. I always say this: you look at All Japan, and who are the guys we think of? The four pillars. Then you have the foreigners like Stan Hansen, Dr. Death, kind of these serious guys. In New Japan, they had serious guys. Don't get me wrong, I'm not disparaging anyone, obviously with Inoki and all that. But then you look at someone like a Muta, who's this over the top character, with the face paint, the mist, and the craziness. I always felt like I remember I was doing a show with Striga, and we were, talking about Muta's career and his title run as Great Muta, his very first title run. And I was thinking about it because I was like, man, I'm just not into this compared to the All Japan stuff. The All Japan stuff is way better. But at the same time, you think about like, if you're a kid watching this, like a 9, 10-year-old, then you're going to really be influenced by the Flash a little bit more. Like this comic book superhero, being the champion. Then you have the flashy entrances and the lights and the stage. Whereas All Japan was much more about the wrestling. Like this is like a real sport kind of vibe that they had, when it comes to the main events, especially. They always kept that legitimacy. There was never any like crazy guy that was like the champion at this point in Baba's All Japan. It was always a very serious promotion in that sense. So I think the bare bone structure and the baseball vibe that they had, because you could see the outfield when they were walking out, it kind of felt like you see people in the crowd waving flags and things like that. It felt like a real sports walkout, a boxing vibe at the time. So I did think of that, but I thought that they could have spruced it up a little bit at the same time, just to make it more appealing to the children watching, or any kind of fans like that might appreciate the aesthetic quality a little bit more.
No, I totally agree. Anybody else keep in mind, Baba, his first sport, baseball. So
he just wanted that outfield show. He wanted everybody to know, like, we're in this baseball arena, people.
He's been showing his other love, which was baseball. But into the match itself, we start off with a lockup. There's a rope break, but Kawada chops Misawa instead of breaking cleanly, and Misawa gives him a receipt via an elbow strike. There's another lockup, and that quickly turns into a strike exchange with Misawa coming out on top via his flying spinning lariat. I love this move, Dylan. Like, whenever he hits it, I just love, like, the minute he makes contact with his opponent with the lariat, he just starts spinning before he lands on the ground.
Yeah, it looked great. I think these two, the opening levels, it felt like, what was this match going to be at the time? Because we were just coming off that draw. And I think a lot of people anticipated going into this match. And I think, again, if the same storyline happened today, we would all think kind of the same thing, pretty much. That their thought was, and the way they built this match up was, this match is going long. And I think that and it didn't actually play out that way, since it went even shorter than the draw. But I think that's what they were kind of playing off of in these early parts.
Yeah, so Kawada stops and attempted German suplex from Misawa, and then he does a jumping back kick to Misawa, and then follows up with the trademark boot to the face, and then tries for a jumping kick to the face. But Misawa's, they have so much history together. Misawa's too familiar with Kawada's moves and blocks that. And at this point, like, I just think, wow, this is a very deliberately paced and I will say a very slowly pace match. And you got to factor in that Misawa is dealing with some some injuries here. Like, he's really banged up going into this match.
Yes, that was pretty much the point I was trying to make earlier, is that they were really being slow at the start because they were teasing that this match would go very long. Because the whole point of this was no time limit. It'll go as long as it takes. Kind of like I said, if they did like when Omega and Okada did their deal, they pretty much did a very similar storyline where it would be a very long match. And I think they were trying to tease that here, although they swerved us more or less at the end. But yes, the injuries was completely valid. I know even on the commentary, they were kind of mentioning Misawa's injury. So it wasn't like this was some bull crap, like in WCW, where if somebody was injured, they tried to be like, aha, screw you, Meltzer, I'm not injured. Observe this and all that. It was like they were acknowledging that Misawa was breaking down at this point.
Yeah, Kawada really slows the pace down. He's holding Misawa in a side headlock. And it's in this sequence here that the commentators, bring up the relationship between Misawa and Kawada. They're talking about, that Misawa is the senpai to Kawada's kohai. And I thought that was really interesting that they want the fans at home watching this to understand, this is really important. This is gonna, be really important for those watching for Kawada, that he's gonna finally, at the end of this match, overcome his senpai, which is a big deal in Japanese culture, let alone like Japanese sports and pro wrestling. So I thought that was really kind of interesting, like from the commentators to bring that relationship up here. And I mean, like, yeah, what do you think about that aspect of it, about the commentary?
I like that they really brought in the realism, and they kept things because that story is not a pro wrestling story. That's a real life thing that he is his senpai, and he has the age gap, the experience gap in his favor, and that is always a big thing. I remember you telling me, even as it's something like your work when you were over there, if someone was senior to you, then that was a really big deal. That's something in Japan. Obviously, I don't have first-hand experience with that, and I would probably not work very well in that environment because I'm kind of crazy as a wrestler. But like in Japan, that really is a big deal from all experience that I've had with people that have lived there, people that work there, people that have really interacted with native Japanese at all. That is always brought up that you have to be respectful to your seniors.
Definitely, definitely. Back to the match, Misawa gains the advantage with elbow strikes and knocks Kawada down with a beautiful looking missile drop kick. But, I got to say, Dylan, for the most part, I feel this match up to this point has been in one gear and it's been set at a specific pace. And everything really feels so familiar and, dare I say it, rather stale.
Yeah, I was kind of going to mention this point at the end, but this is I kind of alluded to it earlier. This was more or less the last gasp of this era because at the end of the day, this storyline has been going on for 8 years without a definitive conclusion, and you still have stuff like Kobashi and Misawa as well on here. It's the same kind of guys over and over. So yes, I completely agree with that. I think this was really the do or die point at the Tokyo Dome. And I wonder, I think it would have been very interesting to see if they didn't have this dome show, would they have put over Kawada like this as they did? Because it was such a special circumstance to do this where it all kind of fell into place, even though I think we'll ultimately agree that it didn't quite work out that way perfectly, but still without the dome, I think this loses quite a bit, to be honest with you.
Maybe. Misawa sends Kawada to the outside and follows up with a beautiful looking elbow suicida. This gets a nice pop from the crowd, but most of them have seen this move tons of times. Especially with these two participants. Misawa maintains his control by applying his face lock several times to Kawada, but the audience has been conditioned not to react to these holds, Dylan, since Kawada, like the only way they know Kawada's going to get beat by Misawa is if when Misawa hits him with several big bombs, like usually some of them being right on Kawada's head. Before he's gonna be pinned by Misawa. No one's expecting Kawada to submit to any hold that Misawa is going to put him in.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's the trouble with having your entire main event scene built around the same four guys over and over. I think we mentioned this on the other show again, or it's something we've definitely mentioned at certain points, or I've said before. But the whole four pillars thing, I think everybody thinks of it automatically. Like if I were to tell you the four pillars, we know what you would think about. AEW's four pillars, obviously. But no, like everybody would think about All Japan. But in general, in Japan, this is a thing. Like four pillars of everything. That's a cultural denomination, whether it's music, sports, whatever. These just happen to be the four pillars of wrestling. That's always a big thing in Japanese culture. And the problem is that they built so much around it that it was going to get to this point eventually where, things were going to run out.
You know what I call those guys? The AEW four. I don't call them the pillars. I call them the chair legs. The four chair legs. That's what I call them. Anyways.
Very accurate.
Kawada finally reverses his fortunes by hitting Misawa with a great, I love this move, this great short range spinning heel kick that, like he just, like spins forward and just like nails Misawa with his heel kick. I love it. Like for me, I'll just say this right now. Like when Kawada's on the offense and he's hitting his strikes, especially, like that's when I'm coming alive watching this match, Dylan.
And they were kind of building a little bit of a narrative through this match because, Misawa early on, he was doing his big moves like the drop kick and the elbow suicida and all of that. But it felt like every time Misawa would start to get a run going, Kawada would just turn around and kick him in the face, which is such a Kawada strategy to build a match around that I couldn't help but start to love it even at this point. So yes, I did appreciate those Kawada moves as well, but especially the narrative way they were using them in that Misawa would start to get an advantage, and then Kawada would counter by kicking him in the face, which I appreciate.
Yeah. I mean, this is evident in like the next sequence, which he sees Misawa reverse a top rope superplex, and then like he reverses it like and Kawada lands on his back, but Misawa recovers very very nicely. But Kawada just gets up and boots him back into the face and knocking Misawa back down. He then, what's great about this sequence, he then follows up with this amazing looking brainbuster. But oddly enough, he doesn't follow up with a pin attempt. But he does go for a pin attempt after hitting a jumping knee to the back of Misawa's head. But he only gets a 2 count here, and then Misawa reverses a folding powerbomb attempt, but gets knocked down with a boot to the face. And again, and you're alluding to this, of course, obviously, that the boot to the face is a trademark move from Toshiaki Kawada. But I gotta say, like at this point, like I've seen all of this, like because like I have seen these. Like I want to be clear, like, hey, I did not watch this stuff initially in sequence. Okay. Like I would be all over the place, jumping from year to year, watching these matches. But like, like if you put it in context, like all this stuff that they're doing in this 98 match has been done for the last 6 years, and it at some point, like you might be excited to see it because they might want to try to be sparing with it, like keep it special as a singles attraction. But at the same time, it's like, yeah, I've seen Misawa get to a boot to the face maybe 1,000,000 times.
I agree with you, to be honest with you, but I also think that that's not a criticism of this match more so than All Japan at this point, as we were getting in there, because yes, that's true of this match, but you could say the same thing about every combination of the 4 pillars, pretty much. This one is the most noteworthy because they were the 2 biggest stars and like the ones that they would have, go against each other the most. But I would say that was a big problem with All Japan in general at this point, and especially 99 and 2000. I definitely think there needed to be some changes.
Misawa's stuck in the corner. And Kawada starts a flurry of kicks and knees to Misawa's face. But, this just seems to piss off Misawa instead of, like, really hurt him. And he gets up, no-sells these strikes, including some rapid-fire Kawada kicks to the face. He just no-sells this stuff. And then until he just, he knocked Kawada down with an elbow, a stiff-looking elbow.
That elbow was awesome.
It was awesome.
Yeah, like, great fire. That totally felt like, he just... You know what? I'm pissed. Let me throw this big elbow. For whatever reason, I don't know if it was real or not, but it felt so good how he did it. I love that elbow. I noted that right away.
I think usually when you have this spot, like in Misawa Kawada matches where, Kawada's got him in the corner, especially, he just likes I think he's like, he's potatoing him to some extent. Like he's not going to knock him out or anything like that, but he's like, you know what? Fuck you. Fuck you in the way you have probably influenced the booking of me in this company for the last 6 years. And he's gonna, I think he's gonna, what's the phrase in wrestling, Dylan? I'm gonna tool him up. Is that the phrase I'm looking for?
Sure.
I think Kawada says, I'm gonna tool up Misawa a little here in this corner. I'm not gonna hurt him, but I'm gonna I'm not gonna injure him. Like, let me rephrase that. I'm not gonna injure him. I'm gonna potato him. I'm gonna tool him up. Whatever you want to say. If you're in wrestling, let me know. If you're a wrestler, send me a DM. Anyways, but then I think that elbow is like a fucking receipt, dude. He's like, fuck you. It's some legit potatoes. Kawada back to say fuck you. But he's probably used to it because what happens next is that from that elbow, Kawada gets up and just fucking boots him to the face, and then Misawa gets up and hits another elbow to the face. It's just like a back and forth between these two.
Yes. Sometimes when somebody would do something like that when I was wrestling. They would say like, "I'm going to light you up," type of deal. But that sounds very good too. To tool you up. I don't know if that's official or not. I've never heard that, but I'm just from Memphis, not from Japan, unfortunately. But
I think I heard that like in some clip from a shoot interview that I can't recall who was in the shoot interview. I think they used the word, "We're gonna tool them up. We're gonna like I don't know." Anyways,
yeah, yes, but yes, Kawada and Misawa, whatever they did, they hit each other very hard.
Yes.
In layman's terms, and I loved seeing it. Honestly, like yes, we have seen a lot of this before, but it was still very comforting, I guess, to say here. I obviously, it's a good way to work this match from a narrative perspective to cover up Misawa's injuries at the time and general sluggishness from his perspective, I thought. Because things were getting a little bit, again, the early going of this match was not very exciting, to be perfectly honest with you. Again, I felt like they were purposely trying to tease that this match would go very long and trying to, get people to think that way. But then now we're starting to see a little bit more of a fire here. We're starting to see their feud and rivalry come into play a little bit more during the match here. And we would start to see some back and forth with big moves, whether it was the power bomb or the Tiger Driver tease. Then we had the big strikes. So they would try to tease a little bit of their old reliables during this middle portion.
Yeah, it's at this point that we now get to the kind of the standard exchange of the big moves, the head dropping stuff, and the big strikes from these guys. These include like tons of German suplexes, like especially like the release kinds and backdrop drivers that are dropping both men on their heads. And of course, these still get tremendous pops from the crowd because if you're seeing this stuff live, like these moves live, it's gonna pop you. Like I don't care who you are, like you're just gonna be like, if it's gonna pop you because it's exciting, or it's gonna pop you because it's dangerous and you're like worried that someone's not gonna be getting up from one of these moves, during the course of this match. But thankfully that is not a factor in this match. But one of my favorite points of this match, Dylan, happens around this time. Kawada gets rocked with his German suplex, but he gets up, and then with his brilliant delayed selling, he staggers down and out of the ring to the floor. And I just thought Kawada is so great at selling.
Absolutely. One of the greatest of all times. Again, much like our beloved Stan Hansen, everyone knows him as this super badass guy, like Kawada. Oh, yeah, he's known Dangerous K. He kicks hard. But in reality, he's actually way underrated as a defensive wrestler, selling and making his opponent look great, as I consider him legitimately one of the absolute greatest of all time at that, whether in tag or singles works. And we saw it again here, and we're starting to see things wake up a little bit with his great selling here. It's going to lead to some good stuff in a little bit.
There's a Tiger Driver on Kawada and a pin attempt, but no one buys that this is the finish. I don't think Misawa's ever beaten anyone with the Tiger Driver from like this point, because it's all like, well, unless it's like some mid-card, jobber dude like, Kentaro Shiga or Makoto Hashi, like he's not pitting Kawada with the regular Tiger Driver. Come on now. But what's great is that from here, Kawada grabs the leg and he just delivers this vicious looking dragon screw leg whip. And I love it. It's so amazing looking that when he does it.
He's even doing these New Japan moves better than the New Japan guys. It seems like with the dragon screw. But yeah, that was awesome, honestly. And this is starting to come into another narrative that we've seen throughout the match at this point, which was Kawada would work the leg throughout the match at different points, as well as the elbow. So he was really trying to work a dual like limb work story. We always say work the leg. It's kind of like a cop out in a lot of ways of wrestling nowadays, but he really did it. And he was also working on the elbow as well. So he was doing kind of a dual limb work, and that leg would definitely come into play in the near future.
Yeah, I mean, to your point, he locks in a single leg crab on Mitsuharu Misawa, and I gotta shout out Misawa. He does such a great job selling this single leg Boston crab, where he's just screaming in agony being put in this move, like because like he just experienced that amazing looking dragon screw leg whip.
Yes, absolutely. I thought he was awesome in that whole segment. I thought it was a really well done sequence in general.
Kawada also tries to lock in, and he successfully locks in the figure four leg lock. And again, Misawa selling this is just he's so great at it. And then like you said, then he switches to attacking.
That
Misawa's
might
right
have been
arm.
my favorite part of the whole match was Misawa selling in that figure four. I thought he was absolutely phenomenal, even more so than the crab hold, the single leg crab. I thought that figure four was such a good spot in general, and Misawa made this feel totally real. The way he was selling, he made you think that he was in complete pain, and we know he was injured. He's probably struggling in all sense of the word. But man, that figure four was so awesome, and not a move you would really associate with these two either. No. So I did appreciate that they threw that little wrinkle in with the legwork going on before we went to the elbow, which is, to be honest with you, again, to your point earlier, this is a story we've seen him attempt to do, not ever really be successful at it, but we've seen him attempt to take away Misawa's ultimate weapon, the elbow, for years and years, and then now he would give it a go once again in the dome.
Well, I thought it made sense because the reason I think he starts going after the right arm is because Kawada attempts a gamangiri, like a jumping kick to the face to Misawa, but Misawa blocks it with his right arm, and so and then he visibly grabs it that he damaged it. Kawada might not have hit him in the face, but he hit Misawa in that elbow, in that arm, and now it hurts. So of course, he sees an opening and he's going to switch his strategy from the leg to the right arm. And he goes with, he goes after it with arm breakers, like Yuji Nagata style arm breakers, arm bars and arm locks. And Kawada's just doing everything he can to make sure he can't get hit with that elbow anymore. But also at the same time, if he can make Misawa be, submit by using, his own, greatest weapon against him, which is his right arm, his right elbow, then that'd be a great, feather in his cap as well.
Absolutely. And another good thing about all of this, I really liked, he really started to focus on the leg after he was really put in jeopardy. He, as you said, I don't think anybody really bought the Tiger Driver as a finish, but we were starting to see the tide turned to Misawa, and that's when Kawada went to the leg and then the elbow. It was kind of like a way for him to counter the tide that was turned to Misawa's favor.
Yeah, and like you said, and again, there's another Tiger Driver and a kick out. But then Kawada hits Misawa with a kick to the gut and follows up with this spinning heel kick to the face. He just pinpoint hits him in the face, and then follows up with an amazing gamangiri, and then he goes for the pin. It's only a 2 count, but this crowd is super into this match now. At this point, they're oh my god, we are hitting the crescendo of this match, and now it's just they know what's going to come next. Lots of big moves, lots of 2 counts, but and a lot of emotional investment from this crowd.
Absolutely. I mean, this felt like a legitimate Tokyo Dome main event in every sense of the word. And obviously considering the emotional stakes of it all and the stories they were telling in the match, to be honest with you, if you really look at it, there was a lot going on in terms of a lot of the stuff they were doing, a lot of the narratives that you could point to, and a lot of the threads in the match itself. So, the crowd was totally into it, and it felt like a huge match at this point.
There's a picture perfect gamangiri that hits Misawa square on his chin. There's an elbow for Misawa that knocks Kawada down, but he gets right back up and hits another spinning heel kick. This is if you love Kawada spinning heel kicks, this is the move. This is the match for you.
And who doesn't love that?
I don't know. There's some weird people out there, Dylan. I'm sure there's some people who's I don't want to see Kawada do a spinning heel kick. Well, too bad. You're missing out on life. That's what I got to say. There's a German, a gamangiri, a folding brainbuster, all from Kawada, of course, for 2 counts. And just this amazing string of great moves from Kawada that gets, this crowd in the Tokyo Dome is now super fired up. They're into this, Dylan. They're and they're especially into Kawada. I got to really say, the way this back end of this match is booked, it's really making people be impressed with Kawada and like, my God, this guy is the best wrestler in this company right now.
Yeah, absolutely. And, going back to their original match where, in 10/21/92, when Kawada had the crowd on his side, we saw it again, this time in the Dome. It felt like the tide was turning, not necessarily in the match, but in the whole point of their rivalry. It felt like this was a turning point for a lot of the fans, and they wanted to will this to happen. They didn't want to see him come up short again. They wanted to see him finally get it. And the stuff that he was doing in this match was, never mind whatever you want to say about the match, just from an execution standpoint, completely great. Like, so good. Everything he did in this match, pinpoint accuracy, great work from Kawada. Misawa did have, he had his spots as well. I particularly like when he did the elbow. When Kawada wanted to block and then he just elbowed through it. I thought it looked really good. And I also like that his main weapon in this particular match, I wish that they had done this a little bit more in some of the other matches, but in this match in particular, I feel like he kept looking for the Tiger Suplex, which won their biggest match from 6/3/94 at this point. He wanted to go to that as his kill shot on Kawada, and he kept looking for it at various points as a bigger move than just a regular Tiger Driver. So I appreciated that little nod to continuity there.
There's a folding power bomb from Kawada. 1, 2, kick out. The crowd is so hot right now, but hey, guess what happens next? There's another folding power bomb, and this time 1, 2, 3. Yes, Toshiaki Kawada has finally done it, Dylan. He has won the Triple Crown from Mitsuharu Misawa, and this is 6 years after their first match for the Triple Crown. And this is 17 years since they were on the same, high school wrestling team. And it culminates in this. And right after, we see a shot of Kawada. He stretches his arms straight up in the air and he says, "This is the best moment of my life. And I'm happy that everyone could enjoy this great moment with me." That's the translation we got, during my research here, Dylan, that he's just happy. This is like, I did it. And he's really happy that the fans could share in this moment with him. And what a great human being. He cares so much about the fans.
I thought this finish was absolutely phenomenal for various reasons. And to me, whatever criticisms could be laid at the match, this is what really made the match to me, was the finishing stretch. And not even necessarily from the finishing run was awesome. Like you said, the crowd was super into it, and they were really, putting in their top of the line stuff for this finish, which they should. It's the biggest show in your company's history and of either man's careers, to be perfectly honest with you. And they should make it the biggest thing they could have. When he finally hit that second power bomb, I thought it was actually really smart to have him kick out, because it led you to believe, like, oh crap, here we go again. Misawa's about to win. And when he hit the second power bomb, if you notice on the pin, it's like he has this very dramatic, like, Superman lean over. Like he elevates his legs off the ground, like he's almost vertical pinning Misawa in the powerbomb position. He's all over his body. His feet are in the air. He is desperately trying to make sure this pinfall hits. And I thought it was, like, so good. I can't express how awesome this finish was. And then the ending, or rather the immediate post-match, where, like you said, he goes off and immediately his arms are in the air, looking out, stretching out to the heavens, saying, "Yes, I finally did it." And if you notice all of his other wins, like the Bullcrap Champion Carnival win, whether it was the tag win that he had, the tag wins, they never really had that same effect where it was like, his arms were in the air and it felt like this moment of euphoria, and it was real. Like, it was real. I have every reason to believe that the man, never mind the wrestler or character or whatever, Kawada felt something real about this. And that made me feel something real about it. It made the fans feel something real about it. And I thought it was, like, perfect pro wrestling. Like all of the last minutes, the last couple of minutes, including, and then the post-match afterwards. You mentioned the promo. They lift him up on their shoulders, which is a great, great image, very reminiscent of Misawa, like Kawada lifting Misawa up on his shoulders when he beat Jumbo on June 8th, 1990, which was like Misawa's biggest moment of his career at that point. It was so reminiscent of that. This felt like Misawa beating Jumbo. Obviously, the dynamics are a little bit different just because they're a little bit closer in age and friendship before and all that crap. But it was so well done. I just thought all of this was just phenomenal, like absolutely fantastic for wrestling.
Yeah, I mean, this moment, like, there is a sense of genuine, happiness, elation, even from Kawada and with the crowd. Like, they're super into like that he won the Triple Crown finally from Misawa, and I think that's great. But like, if I guess I'll just do it now. Like, if I'm to give this match a rating out of 5 stars, like I'm gonna go 4 stars for this. Like, I think it's especially the back end of this match, it's really good, and I really like the back end. But like, to get to it, we had at least I feel I had to endure like some really stale stuff from these guys. Not that it's bad or anything. It's just like, oh, I've seen it, and like, you could argue like, well, WH, you've seen like the 94 match before. It was like, yeah, but in context, like I try to watch things with a certain context to them, like of the time period and like where it is in relation to other matches, especially if it's a series of matches like Misawa Kawada, or like say Steamboat and Flair, or Rock and Austin or something like that, right? Like I try to keep it in context. What point in their history is this match? And like with this 98 match, I just feel like, wow, like I've seen it. I feel the crowd has seen a lot of this stuff, and it doesn't really get to that 4.5, 5-star level range for me. But like, and I think it has a lot to do with like the fact that it should have happened 4 years earlier, so I don't know how you feel about that.
I think it would be hard to argue that for sure, that it would have been much better if it had happened years earlier, and it should have been happened years earlier. And yes, in 98, again, I really don't think it's a problem of these guys or this match. I think the style was getting stale in general, and there needed to be some changes, which they gradually wanted to implement, going forward in general. And that's why there were a lot of problems in a lot of ways going forward in the next couple of years. But to me, when you see the end of this match, you hear the crowd, you hear the call. The commentary was really strong here. Just the excitement, it all felt so real and genuine in a way that it's really tough to replicate in a lot of the other matches. That 94 match was just a better match. I mean, there's no other way to say it. Like 6-3 94 was a better match than this, unquestionably. I feel like everyone would agree that's seen both of them. The match itself, I think ultimately that the injuries, it being in 98 and not 94 for multiple reasons. I think like not just him not winning, but just the staleness of it, as you mentioned, that definitely took a hamper on it. I would say the first half of the match definitely suffered, but I also think that there was purpose behind it, which I appreciated a lot. That they had the story of the no time limit, which this match ended in less time than the 30-minute draw. So I appreciate that they went out of their way to tease that this would be this epic All Japan match, but they did something different. It was almost like a minimalist version of their normal matches. So I appreciated that they did something different. Again, the moment really makes the match more than the match itself, even though I thought the last half really was really good, but really the last minute of the match is like that. Whatever you think, that was so amazing that I can't possibly say anything bad about it. But 4 stars seems fair. I don't think that's a bad rating at all. That's still a great match, really. I really have no problem with that rating at all. I think 4.25, 4.5, whatever. I wouldn't say this was like one of the greatest matches of all time, or even of All Japan, and definitely not of their series. But I still thought that it was special because of the moment and the way that the crowd reacted and the stage it was on. At the end of the day, this was the biggest show in company history. And they chose to put this on there. They didn't choose Kobashi versus Misawa. As Kobashi had a building storyline with Misawa, they picked Kawada to do it, and the fans reacted this way. The crowd reacted, the announcers reacted. So I think it was very special. Unfortunately, that would not last for Kawada going in. But I'm gonna throw a question to you, WH, here, just to add on here. I think it's something worth mentioning. And I think it's something that a lot of people really bring up in general. I guess we could kind of talk about it now. I don't remember us ever talking about this specifically before. Do you think that part of it, and a part of the reason why this match doesn't really stand out, because I think most people would agree with what we said, that it's not one of their greatest matches or anything like that. Do you think that a part of it is that at the end of the day, you mentioned the staleness and all of that, but did they, and the four pillars specifically, and the All Japan style, whatever you want to call it, did they escalate things too far with the style, with the big bombs and things like that, to the point where you were mentioning during the match, a Tiger Driver, which was a big move, in the past, not even 10 years prior to this, now it's like nobody believes in it. It has to be something bigger.
Oh, yeah, I totally think that they escalated things too far with the head dropping and the dangerous, like, moves. Like, you have the burning hammer, the Misawa's variations of like different suplexes in the Tiger Driver 91. You have Kawada, his brainbuster is pretty dangerous looking, even though I'm sure it's perfectly safe. But like, a year later, he's going to create the fucking Genzo, like accidentally, he's going to create the Genzo bomb. Right. So, yeah, like there is a point where like, I do think there's an escalation, and they needed to change their style or tweak it at the very least, because, I'm not going to say the style in of itself is stale or what have you. I think, the participants doing the style have to change. I mean, like Baba just falls into the same pattern that he's going to fall into if like Tenryu never left, and it would have been like, Jumbo and Tenryu at the top. And it would have taken a lot longer for like, Misawa and company to crack through to that main event level. But, like Baba, the problem with All Japan at this point, and like, I love this era, but it's not without its fault, is that he doesn't have anyone outside of Akiyama to really, take the company to, he doesn't have like besides Akiyama, he doesn't have another three to go with Akiyama. I think if he really spent a lot more time developing like Omori, and then when he got Takayama, okay. But like he had in hindsight, he had a diamond in the rough with Mossman, Taiokea, that he never really exploited, and he should have. And, but like he has all these like juniors that are going to be like, holy fuck, in the next decade, like amazing. And one of the highlights of Pro Wrestling Noah in its infancy and in its peak years is like their junior division, which are all the guys that are starting off in this fucking dojo at this time. And it's like, oh my God, if we only knew, right? Like, but I think you could have had, like, I think if you started introducing, if Baba broke away from the like, oh, it's going to take forever for Akiyama to reach the top level. Like I would have like done Akiyama, like of all things, if things did not change for All Japan and Renault never was never created, and Misawa stayed, and like Mrs. Baba was the one who like was bought out, whatever, something like that, then Akiyama should have won the Triple Crown in 2000, no later than that. Not 2001. He should have like started the new, the new century off with being the guy who's going to lead the company, and then bring along Mossman, bring along Omori, and bring along Takayama as like your new, not four pillars, but you know what I mean? That next generation that's going to help elevate everyone else. And then like, just give the juniors like, boom, like, Baba, that's probably something Misawa would have done if he was still the booker of All Japan. Like he would have seen, Marufuji and, Kenta and Kanemaru and Hashi, and even like, and he's got Sugiura also in the wings as well. We never see him in All Japan necessarily in any significant role, because we always think of him as a Noah wrestler. But like, he's got like, there's so much potential that you're going to have in the coming 10, 15 years that it's what if Noah never happened? What if these guys all stayed in All Japan? It would have been interesting.
Well, it's interesting you bring them up because if you really look at where they were at before the split, No Fear was who they were grooming to be the next guys. Takayama had that Triple Crown shot in 2000 versus Kobashi. Omori had the 7-second win over Akiyama, which is a continued factor in Akiyama not being a main eventer like he should have. Really, if you go back and look, even before this match we just talked about, Akiyama had a match with Misawa, which you could argue would have been a great time to put Akiyama over as Jumbo put over Misawa, because in a lot of ways, Akiyama was really the natural successor to Misawa as the next ace of the next four pillars, whatever you want to call it. He really was that next guy that should have been the top guy, but Misawa didn't give him what Jumbo gave Misawa. And it sucks that it happened that way. And, Akiyama obviously still had a great career and was a great main eventer and all that later on. But I think that really hurt a lot of things. And they were kind of formulating it to where it would be Akiyama, Omori, and Takayama. They didn't really have a fourth guy to go along with them, but they would have figured something out.
I think they would have gone with Kea. I think they would have gone with him because he's going to be positioned as Akiyama's tag partner. He's going to be like Akiyama's Kawada, I feel like that No Fear, we're going to be like your new Holy Demon Army. And then, Akiyama and Kea, we're going to be like the other, tag team with like Kea being like Akiyama's sidekick, basically.
Yeah, that would have been interesting. Have a foreigner teaming with Akiyama, as the fourth pillar. That would be great. Taiyo Kea was a really good worker. I really enjoyed his wrestling. I thought he was a great guy that he could be in the Muto era of All Japan. I think he has, had a really great role in the company. So I definitely think that would have been the right move ultimately. I think the juniors really would have had a tough time breaking through just because it was that way in All Japan, and for forever, really. I think the juniors have always kind of struggled in All Japan, and that's just Baba's way at the end of the day.
But Misawa would have pushed them after Baba died. If he was still, he was the booker, he would have pushed the juniors because he did that in Noah, right?
He totally did it in Noah. I just wonder if it would have happened the same way in All Japan. If he would have followed Baba's ways a little bit more. But yes, in Noah, the juniors were very important under Misawa's role. That was the best part of everything about Noah, was that the juniors finally got to have some importance and actually like really awesomely push, to be honest with you, those first few years. In general, All Japan was such a minefield with Mrs. Baba and Misawa there. And as I said, like even then in 2000, I thought, like you were saying, it's not that the company was bad or anything. It just felt like there needed to be a big change. I think Noah was actually a good thing for Japanese wrestling as a whole, just because there needed to be changes all the way around. And you got great stuff at the end of it. Tenryu coming back was an amazing moment for All Japan. It set up so many things. You had All Japan and New Japan working together, which led to New Japan and Noah working together, which who knows if that would have happened if, All Japan had never split up. Would they have worked with New Japan more? These are all things nobody really knows because nobody knows how Mrs. Baba would have reacted things. But on the other hand, it spares us Muto era All Japan, which I would have been very happy to avoid. So there are positives and negatives to it. But I really think there needed to be some big changes. And you mentioned it on this show. I really feel like this is the end of the line because at the end of the day, nothing can replace this moment that happened at the end of all of this. Nobody can take that away. But after that, I mean, what were the big moments? After this, because they kind of squandered this whole thing with Kawada, and he had injury problems and everything else. I couldn't believe how they handled this after this title reign. But after that, what is the big moments of All Japan in '99 and 2000?
Well, I mean, like I'd have to go back and really look at it, but
they're really worth that many. Like,
sticking out top of my head, no. But like, I mean, if I do think like if I really take the time to research it, like I could probably come back with like maybe 2 or 3, examples for you. But like maybe that's a conversation. Well, that's a conversation for another time, maybe. But I mean, in context of Misawa versus Kawada, what happens after this is like, Osaka. January 22nd, 1999.
Oh yeah.
6 minutes into this match, Kawada versus Misawa, Kawada throws a spinning back fist to the back of Misawa's head and fractures his forearm. He breaks his arm basically, and then but he was still wrestled for another 19 minutes. Amazing, just a sheer, gut check performance for Kawada. This is also the famous match where because his arm is broken, he can't do the folding power bomb. He can't get Misawa up, so he's just dangling there. Kawada's holding him, and then says, "Well, I got to do something." So he then creates the Gonzo bomb, which is a move where you drop your opponent right on their head. Not really shouldn't do this, but thankfully, anyways, he then hits a Gamagiri, and then one of the stiffest brain busts you're ever going to see in the history of wrestling, and he wins the Triple Crown for the second time from Misawa. But then, 7 days later, he leaves Budokan in an ambulance on that night, and 7 days later on January 29th, Kawada has to give up the title. Like, who knows if he didn't break his arm, maybe he would have had an amazing title reign. After that, it's Kawada versus Misawa at Budokan on July 24th of 99. Misawa beats him. Champion Carnival. This is Misawa booking this. He's now the booker, full on booker. This is 2000. This is March 31st, 2000. This is the first round of a 16-man single elimination tournament. He moves away from the round robin format. He meets Kawada in the first round, and he defeats him. And why? I don't know why. And then the next time that they meet is significantly is back at the Tokyo Dome. I forget the date, but I'm sure you have it, Dylan. He in Noah's big Tokyo Dome show.
Yeah, Destiny 2005.
Destiny 2005. Yeah. And they have a fun match, a decent match. It's not as good as their stuff in the 90s, but Misawa beats him. Yeah, you would think, yeah, okay, that's because he's the booker. Kawada's the guy from All Japan. I personally think, and I thought this even in 2005 when I saw this match, Dylan, I think Misawa should have put over Kawada in that match.
Yeah, I think that would have been an interesting, a call. It would have been tough because of where things were at the time with Noah, compared to All Japan at the time, and in general, Kawada, great wrestler, whatever. There was a lot of personal issues between Kawada and Misawa. Again, we kind of go into that on the other show, but for whatever reason, Misawa, and just in general, Misawa loved putting himself over. No disrespect, no disrespect to Misawa, but you look at his career, even in Noah, even after all of that, by 2005, Misawa was not what he once was. And, he was old. He was stressed out running the company. He wasn't the wrestler he once was, but he still had a big run on top. And in a lot of ways, I think in his mind, he felt like, and maybe there is truth to this, there is a hinge of truth to this. They needed him to be a successful company. When, again, the evidence of that is what happened after he died. Things went way down without him at the end of the day. But you could argue a part of that, it's like a self-fulfilling prophecy. You didn't make any new stars, so when he unfortunately left, they didn't have anybody to carry that torch. So it was really a mind-boggling circle, so to speak. But yes, Misawa and Kawada, it would have been interesting. I couldn't imagine that happening, just knowing their history and how everything happened. Even during that match, Kawada ended up getting super heat, and he never worked with Misawa again after that match.
Yeah. Let's end the show with just taking kind of an overall look. Misawa beats him in 1998 in front of All Japan's largest crowd ever. But, ultimately, Misawa's legacy would always overshadow Kawada in terms of the numbers. This Tokyo Dome victory that Kawada had ended Misawa's third title reign, which lasted 466 days. Misawa's second reign was 364 days long. But Misawa's first reign was the epic 705 days of Misawa's first Triple Crown reign. In comparison, Kawada's first reign lasted a mere 133 days, and he only had one quote unquote successful defense. This wasn't even a win. It was a 60-minute draw with Kenta Kobashi before he loses the title to Stan Hansen. The second Kawada reign only lasted 45 days, and Kobashi would lose the title. No, Kawada would lose the title to Ken Kobashi on the next tour for All Japan.
And that was just after this match we talked about it. That's what I really don't understand. Like, you had this amazing moment, and I wonder what was the thinking behind that. To be honest with you, you had your biggest show in history. You built it around this guy finally overcoming his 8-year-long story, and then you lose it a month later. I really disagree with that, to be honest with you. But like I said, things were a little shaky in All Japan at this point for a lot of reasons, and that definitely was not something I think is good because, all this stuff I talked about, that great moment and all of that, it just really didn't last that long at the end of the day, which is, it would have been interesting to see at least. Nothing against Kobashi. Like, everybody loves him. He's an amazing worker, one of the greatest ever. Everybody knows that. But it would have been interesting to see Kawada have a longer reign.
Definitely. Anyways, final thoughts?
There's one more point I'd like to make about all of this. And because it really reminds me all the stuff we're talking about, and especially on the Misawa topic. I think ultimately, all of this stuff we're talking about, and all of the stuff that we've said on that, level when you talked about him overshadowing Kawada and putting over people, blah, blah, blah. Do you think that ultimately a big part of why things turned out how they did by the end of the decade in terms of, that staleness we mentioned and trying to get, new people over and maybe not being able to at the moment, whatever they were building towards that we didn't get to see, unfortunately. Do you think Misawa as the ace, his legacy is so strong, many people consider him the greatest of all time, and he was able to springboard that into a successful company that ended up overshadowing Baba's company for while he was alive? Do you think that him getting pushed so hard as the ace, while it did benefit him, there's no question about that, do you think, despite all of the successes that All Japan had during the 90s and during his title reigns and during his big runs, do you think that there could have been more done to elevate other people, whether it was Kawada or Akiyama? I think is another person you can point to. He did get his big win in 2000, but the point is, do you think his ace run maybe did some damage? Not to say that it wasn't great, because it was a great thing, not just in terms of the matches, but in terms of the company itself. But do you think there was some damage done that paid off years down the line in the later part of the 90s from his earlier run and the reluctance of Baba and whoever to not put over a new star, Kawada or otherwise?
Yes, I totally think his super push, his over push as the ace of the company, while, obviously great box office success for All Japan, like, in if you look at it in a long-term, point of view, in context, and we have the hindsight now of looking back at this, is like, yeah, he was overpushed. You should have made Kawada his equal. You should have pulled the trigger on Kobashi a lot sooner, before his knees were like completely shot. By the time like we get to the point where he's like having his 99 2000, were before like the departure of him to Noah with Misawa and everyone else, and you should have started laying the groundwork for that next generation led by Akiyama, like in 98 99, and then there's like, we see the same problems happening in Noah, like where I think like he didn't need to put himself over so strongly. He should have made Akiyama in the first 2 years of Noah's history. He relied too much on himself and on Kobashi. And this is not to take anything away from like Kobashi's GHC title reign, which is amazing. It's great, but
absolutely.
But like again, but why do you pick Rikio, Takeshi Rikio, to be the guy? Like, honestly, like he should have just saw the potential in Morishima earlier and pushed the fucking shit out of Morishima at that time. Morishima, and like, here's the other thing: like Marufuji and Kenta got over. They could have like, and they would eventually, right? Like, again, we have hindsight. They should have been pushed into the heavyweight roles. Like, Noah could have successfully done a more open weight format, because these two guys were so over as wrestlers that didn't matter that they were junior heavyweights, that they eventually would have transitioned into it. But then you had also like Sugiura, at his like physical, was hitting his physical peak. Like, okay, push him, and then you're gonna eventually, all things being equal, you're eventually gonna get Kensuke into the company as well, and Nakajima at the age of like 18 or 19. And it's like, oh my god, like the potential for Noah to like have an amazing 2010 onward, even after Misawa dies, could have been there but it didn't happen because Misawa, I think he felt he was too important to the company. But that, again, you made an excellent, choice of phrase. It's a self-fulfilling prophecy because he did not put anyone over to take over from him because he thought, oh, I'm the most important guy in the company. And a lot of it has to do with like he's looking at box office numbers. But to make money, you have to spend money, and you have to like be willing to lose a little bit of money initially, and that's especially true in pro wrestling, I feel.
I do agree with that, to be honest with you. Their early part was very successful. The mid 2000s were very successful, and unfortunately, we found out later a big reason why that was when Izumita wrote his book, and everything happened. But by the time period at the end, that, like you said, they just really hadn't built up anybody else. I do think they at least they took a step towards at least building these guys. But then they pulled back right away for whatever reason. Remember Marufuji winning the title was a huge deal in 2006, the junior that won the heavyweight title. But then they gave him 1 month, and okay, maybe things didn't work out as great. They made a mistake immediately putting him with Kenta, first of all. It should have been against the heavyweight, his first title defense. But then you do this one show that maybe you didn't love, which, by the way, is literally my favorite match of all time, was Marufuji and Kenta, the very first Japanese match I ever watched. But after that, you go right back to Misawa like 1 month later. So they took a step forward, but then pulled back a little bit too fast. They got scared off a little bit at the end of the day. But the Noah deal is wild in a lot of ways. But I think that Misawa's ace push in All Japan, and I've always kind of felt that. But as we go into this new year, you started off asking me about wrestling in modern era. I've always thought that Okada's push has a lot of similarities to Misawa's in a lot of ways, and how they wanted to book him, and a lot of the things you could say. Although, like, personally, I think Misawa had better matches than Okada. If you're going to put a gun to my head, you don't need to put a gun to my head. I think he clearly is a better wrestler than Okada, quite frankly. But I think that their business effects are very similar, in that you have this guy who is recognized as one of the greatest. You mentioned the Observer Hall of Fame. Virtually everything I've heard about him being brought up is that he is one of the greatest candidates ever. And he's a slam dunk vote and should get everything. But if you really look at his push, look at where they've headed. Like, look at where they're at the last 2 years with his push and with him not being in the main event. They never really adequately prepared for anyone besides Okada, because they hyper-focused on him so much that others didn't really get to reach their peak potential and have the runs that they could have had and maybe even should have had with the people around him. And I feel the same way about Misawa in the 90s, and that there's amazing runs, and that holds a special place in my heart, and just like the New Japan run had a special place in many people's hearts. But you can't deny that things have fallen off and gotten stale, and I think that hyper-focus on a singular star is a big part of it. And I think it could have been handled a lot better. And I think there are very good similarities between both Misawa and Okada in that sense.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it is always better to create a group of stars, not just like I've never been a huge fan of the whole idea of the ace of the company, because I do think that's detrimental to overall business. You have to create a group of aces, like a group of people who are going to lead your company into the future. You make main event stars. I think you should have at least 4 to 6 main event stars that you can, considering injuries and everything like that you can slot people at the top and to draw money. And then, but like when they reach the top, you got to start making that new crop of stars. And yeah, we talk more about this at length, but I think for our purposes, you and I made our points very clear here, and I want to thank you, Dylan, for coming on and picking a great match for discussion point of view. I thought this is one of the best discussions I've had on the show, because we're looking at the overall history of this feud and of like the of All Japan in general as well. And if anyone who enjoyed listening to Dylan and I talk and want to hear more from Dylan and check out more of his work, where can they find you, Dylan?
Yeah, I completely agree. I really enjoyed this episode. I love talking to you about wrestling. I think you have great insights and great opinions. Although I will say I support the people more. No matter who they like, I will always support you out there. But, like I said, I really appreciate you asking me to be on this show. As I said, I really loved the first episode we did with Kawada, and I think this was a very worthy follow-up and successor to that, and side piece, whatever you want to call it. And I like that we got into Misawa a little bit more on this episode, and I tried to purposely do that because we talked a lot about Kawada before. So thank you for that, and thank you to everybody listening. If you do want to hear more of me, maybe there are some of you that are like, oh my God, I hate this guy. But that's okay. But if you do want to follow me, check me out on Twitter at Viva_0. And that's the full word, ZERO, obviously. Check me out at Eastern Lariat. That's my podcast. I host with my main man, Striga. He runs cagematch.net, and I work with him on that as well. And we do a show about Japanese wrestling together, and we've had a lot of fun doing that. We're coming up on 200 episodes of the Eastern Lariat over the last few years. I'm very proud of our work on there. And specifically mine on the patreon.com/Eastern Lariat. It's great support for me on a personal level. And I honestly enjoy doing a lot of the shows that we do on there. There's a lot of different things we can do because there's always like, I try to give show reports maybe, same day, maybe a day or two later, about big shows, whether it's New Japan, All Japan, and even smaller companies, like DDT and, even down to the Joshi companies. I'm a huge fan of Joshi Pro Res. I like all the wrestling in some sort of, way. I always say, like, even the wrestling I hate, I secretly like, because wrestling is my whole life. That's the only thing I've ever done with my life, was either wrestle or write about it on my own old website, or do podcasts about it with great people and great hosts to do that with. So it's a great support and great fun for me to cover all the wrestling, whether it's good, bad, or indifferent. I try to make it entertaining, do some past stuff with the 90s, because I love 90s wrestling as well. Hopefully one day I can get into more 2000 stuff, which is a little bit harder because things aren't as documented during that kind of dark era of wrestling. But I have lots of great ideas. Sometimes I even cover American wrestling too. I'll talk about AEW or WWE if they have a big pay-per-view show or anything like that. I don't think they call them that anymore, unfortunately, because of the Peacock and all of that and whatever is going on. But I always try to cover everything, give everything a fair chance, even if obviously some styles are not my favorite, but at least you'll get some good rants on those as well. There's a lot of heart put into those shows. On there too. I've covered every tournament too this year. If you love wrestling tournaments, the Patreon is where you want to go for sure. Just even if you just sign up for 1 month and download everything, you have a ton of audio on Champion Carnival. We did a DDT Tag League, a random one on there. The first D King tournament, the second D King tournament we had on there. G1, N1, Stardom, two leagues on there, another DDT league. So it's like we have a little bit of everything on there. Great stuff to do. And if you're a fan of Japanese wrestling modern day or in the past, always check out my show, my free show, the Twitter, everything like that. I really appreciate all the support out there, because we do have a lot of really good and knowledgeable people that always respond to us and say nice things. And I know me and Striga both appreciate it. And for the purposes of this show, I personally very much appreciate it as well. So thank you, WH, for giving me this platform to speak on my show with, as always. And hopefully I added something good for you and all the great listeners of Post Wrestling, a website that I've always loved as well.
Oh yeah, definitely. I'm a patron of the Eastern Lariat Patreon. I'm on the big hash level. Gotta go big with the big Hashimoto level.
Only $5 a month for the biggest.
You get a lot of content, folks. Like, honestly, like, it's a little overwhelming for me as I do try to keep up with a lot of different podcasts. And I always get the notifications in my email. You have another show from the Eastern Layer. You have another,
You
like
can't get rid of me, WH.
There's a ton of like it's a wow, it's an embarrassment of riches, shall we say, of like, wow, Dylan's got another show. I haven't listened to the last 3 show he's done because Dylan's a very prolific podcaster, and it's a really great insight. Dylan follows everything in Japanese pro wrestling. Like, I follow very select things. I can't cover everything, but Dylan does cover everything. Him and Striga do cover everything, and Dylan does have other people who help him cover, different promotions in Japan. And if I can give you a sampling of the overall scene, I think if you want more, granular look at it, then definitely Dylan and the Eastern Layered are, the product for you. Go check them out. I support them. You should too.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. Your support means a lot to me, again, on a personal level, because I respect you so much. You've been at this way longer than me, to be honest with you. You have a lot more experience on that level. But just the scene, I think something that really separates me personally, and Striga as well, but I think especially me, if we're being perfectly honest, is that kind of what I alluded to earlier. Wrestling literally is like a huge unhealthy portion of my life in general. So I purposely want to follow these things because it makes me feel like I still wrestle, which in my other wrestling, I had, kind of an injury that took me out. So I can't really do that anymore. So this kind of keeps that flame alive of the thing that I've dedicated my whole life to, pretty much. And that's why even if I don't like something, I always say that I secretly like it, even if it's just talking about it, because at the end of the day, I love wrestling no matter what. And I think that's something that I have. Again, don't be like me. That's my number one advice. Don't be like me. Don't like wrestling as much as me, because there's so much, especially nowadays, as I said, to kind of bring this around full circle, is that so many different people have there's almost like different factions of fans, whether you're a New Japan fan or you're a Joshi fan or you're a Noah fan. It's like sometimes we're seeing that more, and that's something I'm very hyped about, is seeing all the fans come together. And I'm kind of like the one person that's in between everyone. I don't really have a favorite company, but I also don't have a company that I particularly dislike either. I'm kind of just like wrestling no matter what it is. And I think that's something that you can always count on with me, is that my love and my passion for wrestling. If I do this podcast, this Patreon, and we do shows together, me and you, WH, if we do it again for another 45 years, I will still have that passion for wrestling at that point. So that's something that everybody can count on if they support me, or if you just listen to the free show. I totally appreciate that as well.
Well, there you go. Definitely check out the free show, Eastern Layer, Dylan and Striga, Eastern Layer Patreon. Thank you, Dylan. Thank you to all listeners for supporting the show through the purchase of the Long and Winding Railroad t-shirt, which you can find at store.postwrestling.com. And then, of course, there's also the Post Perez t-shirt. And, I might be having another t-shirt coming out soon, like for another show. That's all I'm going to say. I was given some designs earlier to look at, and I was like, oh, those look nice. I'm trying to convince my good friend Wei Ting to like, maybe we should expand to like hats, the folded brim cap, or the dad cap as some people like to call it, or the snapback, which I'm not a fan of personally, but hey, it looks good on some people. Will look even better if you have like this new design that Wei and I are talking about. But thank you, Dylan. Thank you to all the listeners. Check me out on Post Perez every month. Check me out on MC Later pretty much every week whenever there's a new Marvel show over on Disney Plus. And of course, every month on this show. And I don't know what's happening in the January of 2022. It's I can't believe it's going to be like another year gone by here, Dylan. But anyways, thanks to all listeners. And until next time, I'm just going to say have a good night and goodbye.